Few people realize that one of television's most gentle family shows was built on one of Hollywood's most tightly controlled environments. Behind the soft smiles, calm voices, and warm lessons, strict rules quietly shaped every word, every movement, and every relationship. The young stars were not just acting. They were living inside a carefully designed system meant to protect a perfect image at all costs. What the audience never saw were the emotional limits, hidden pressures, and silent boundaries placed on childhood itself. Success brought comfort, but it also brought invisible control. And as fame grew, so did the effort to keep reality from slipping through the cracks. Because beneath that peaceful world, a very different story was unfolding. One that slowly changed how everyone involved understood freedom, identity, and trust. At first glance, Leave It to Beaver seemed like the safest place on television. The homes were clean, voices were gentle, problems were small and always solved with patience. In a world that often felt uncertain, the Cleaver family offered calm, order, and reassurance. Families across America trusted this world. Parents welcomed it. Children learned from it. And week after week, that simple warmth became something people depended on. The timing mattered. During years of social change and quiet anxiety, viewers wanted stability. They wanted stories that felt safe. Leave It to Beaver delivered that comfort carefully, scene by scene. Nothing about the show was accidental. Each line, each movement, and each emotion was shaped to protect that feeling of peace. Behind the camera, a carefully designed system worked constantly to preserve that image. Producers understood that the show's success depended on emotional consistency. There could be no sudden changes, no visible tension, no unpredictable behavior. Every detail had to support the idea of a calm, stable family life. For the young cast, this meant stepping into a world that blended performance and discipline. Their days were tightly scheduled. School lessons were placed between scenes. Rehearsals replaced playtime. Emotional control became part of daily routine. Smiles were expected. Calm voices were encouraged. Loud reactions and strong emotions were gently corrected. Adults believed they were creating a safe environment. In many ways, they were. The studio offered structure, guidance, and protection from chaos. But that safety came with quiet limits. Childhood curiosity had to fit within rules. Natural frustration had to remain hidden. Growth had to appear gentle and controlled. The young actors quickly learned that their roles did not end when filming stopped. Fans saw them as symbols of kindness and innocence. Public appearances required careful behavior. Interviews were guided. Even casual moments carried responsibility. Their image belonged not just to them but to the audience, the network, and the studio. Letters arrived from families who felt comforted by the show. Praise flowed in. Gratitude surrounded them. This love was genuine, but it also carried weight. The children understood that their behavior mattered beyond themselves. Their actions shaped how millions felt. Slowly, they learned to move carefully, speak softly, and think before every decision. Behind the scenes, producers worked constantly to preserve control. Scripts were reviewed again and again. Conflicts were softened. Storylines avoided emotional extremes. Even small changes in tone were seen as risks. Stability became the guiding rule. As the show's popularity grew, pressure increased. Ratings brought opportunity but also fear. Executives worried that any shift could break the delicate balance. Aging had to be slow. Change had to be gentle. Emotional growth had to remain invisible. Over time, the cast began to experience a quiet emotional split. Their public image stayed frozen in kindness and simplicity, while their inner world slowly evolved. They were growing, questioning, and learning, but those changes had no place on screen. Their roles became tightly woven into their identity. Praise came when behavior matched expectation. Silence followed when emotions drifted too far. Slowly, self-expression became cautious. Curiosity became quiet. Individuality waited in the background. To the audience, everything looked peaceful. But behind the soft smiles and gentle lessons, constant effort held that world together. Every scene required control. Every moment required awareness. And beneath the calm surface, a simple question began forming. How long could childhood remain carefully contained before reality began pressing back? Daily life inside the world of Leave It to Beaver followed a rhythm that left little space for surprise. Each morning began early. Schedules were tight. Scenes were planned down to the smallest detail. There was always somewhere to be, something to rehearse, or a line to memorize. Structure shaped everything. For the young cast, this order quickly became normal. They learned to arrive prepared, focused, and calm. Adults guided every movement, every emotion, every reaction. Directors corrected tone. Producers refined delivery. Teachers filled the short breaks between scenes with school lessons. The day flowed smoothly, but it never slowed. Mistakes were addressed quickly and gently. Emotional reactions that felt too strong were softened. Laughter was welcomed, but only in the right moments. Frustration was redirected. Sadness was managed quietly. Over time, emotional regulation became automatic. Calm was not just encouraged, it was expected. This environment created discipline, but it also reshaped how the children understood themselves. They learned that approval came through control. Praise followed obedience. Stability depended on consistency. Slowly, emotional restraint became a survival skill. Outside the studio, life felt distant. Other children explored freely. They argued, ran, played, and made mistakes without consequence. But for the cast, even simple moments carried responsibility. Public recognition meant constant awareness. Behavior reflected not just on themselves, but on the entire production. Parents worked closely with the studio to maintain balance. They wanted their children protected, educated, and safe. In many ways, the system provided that. But it also limited freedom. Friendships were monitored. Public appearances were carefully managed. Privacy became rare. As the years passed, emotional awareness deepened. The children began noticing the boundaries shaping their lives. Their growth was carefully measured. Curiosity had limits. Change required permission. Individual identity slowly blended into public image. At school, they were treated differently. Among peers, they stood apart. Admiration mixed with distance. Some classmates envied their success. Others felt unsure how to relate. This created subtle isolation. Connection became selective. Trust became cautious. Inside, questions began forming. Who were they without the cameras? What did they truly feel? Could they express frustration, fear, or doubt without risking approval? These thoughts remained mostly private, forming quietly beneath their calm surface. Producers focused on protecting stability. Scripts avoided heavy emotions. Conflict remained light. Growth unfolded slowly. Aging was softened. Everything moved at a controlled pace, carefully designed to maintain comfort for the audience. But time moved differently for the children. They changed quickly. New emotions surfaced. Awareness expanded. The gap between their internal world and external image widened. As adolescence approached, emotional tension increased. Their bodies matured. Their thoughts deepened. But their roles remained frozen in childhood. This created an invisible strain. They felt caught between who they were becoming and who they were expected to remain. Still, they carried gratitude. They understood their opportunity was rare. They valued the care and structure they had received. Yet, beneath that appreciation lived quiet pressure, the burden of staying perfect inside a system that rewarded stillness over growth. And as emotional awareness sharpened, a difficult realization emerged. The calm world they helped create was slowly limiting the freedom they longed to explore. The balance between discipline and identity was becoming harder to maintain. And soon, that balance would begin to shift. As the popularity of Leave It to Beaver continued to rise, fame quietly reshaped daily life for the young cast. What once felt like simple work now carried public meaning. Faces became familiar. Voices became recognizable. Ordinary moments slowly turned into public encounters. Trips outside the studio no longer felt private. Strangers smiled. Parents whispered. Children stared. Compliments arrived everywhere. In letters, in stores, in schools, even on sidewalks. At first, the attention felt exciting. It brought pride. It reminded them that their work mattered. But admiration also created pressure. Every word now seemed to carry weight. Every reaction felt observed. Mistakes no longer stayed small. Even ordinary childhood behavior could be misunderstood. The cast learned to stay alert, even during moments meant for rest. Public image became something to protect. Smiles had to remain warm. Politeness had to remain constant. Calm behavior became the safest choice. Slowly, emotional caution followed them everywhere. Producers and studio representatives guided interviews carefully. Answers were shaped to match the show's values. Personal stories were softened. Emotional struggles stayed hidden. The goal was consistency, to ensure the public image matched the gentle world viewers trusted. As fame grew, identity began shifting. The cast were no longer seen as individuals. They became symbols of innocence, kindness, and family values. Their characters blended into their real lives. Audiences expected them to remain gentle, patient, and pure, both on and off screen. This expectation created quiet tension. Childhood naturally brings curiosity, frustration, excitement, and rebellion. But for them, emotional extremes felt risky. Public approval depended on emotional restraint. Change threatened stability. Over time, the cast began measuring themselves through public reaction. Praise reinforced certain behaviors. Silence discouraged others. Emotional expression became filtered. They learned to pause before speaking, to soften reactions, and to avoid conflict. Behind that calm exterior, complexity grew. Questions about identity surfaced. Who were they becoming beneath the roles? Could they explore interests beyond their characters? Would growing up cost them acceptance? Adolescence brought stronger emotions, deeper thoughts, and a desire for independence. But public image remained fixed. The world still saw them as children, even as their inner lives matured. This created emotional dissonance, a gap between internal reality and external expectation. Some felt gratitude mixed with exhaustion. Others experienced confusion. They valued their success, but they also longed for freedom. Private moments became precious. Solitude offered relief. But even then, awareness remained. Fame reshaped relationships. Friendships became complicated. Trust became selective. Some connections felt genuine. Others felt transactional. Knowing who truly cared became difficult. At the same time, the show's success deepened institutional control. Producers increased oversight. Public appearances were more carefully planned. Behavior guidelines tightened. The need to maintain the brand grew stronger. This created a quiet, emotional burden. The cast learned to carry responsibility far beyond their age. They understood that their actions shaped careers, livelihoods, and public trust. Slowly, the joy of performance blended with emotional weight. Fame no longer felt simple. It became layered, rewarding, demanding, and consuming all at once. As childhood innocence faded and self-awareness grew, one question quietly emerged within each of them. How could they become themselves without disappointing the world that loved them? And as adolescence approached, that question would soon demand an answer. As time moved forward, the calm world surrounding Leave It to Beaver began to feel increasingly fragile. The system that once felt protective now faced a challenge it could no longer fully control: growth. The children were no longer children. Their bodies changed. Their voices deepened. Their emotional awareness expanded. And with that growth came questions the show was never designed to answer. Producers tried to slow the transition. Storylines softened aging. Scenes emphasized innocence. Emotional conflict remained gentle. But real life unfolded at its own pace. The gap between public image and private reality widened. Inside the studio, effort increased. Wardrobe choices, dialogue, and behavior were carefully shaped to preserve youthfulness. Each episode carried the weight of maintaining the illusion that nothing had changed. But subtle differences became impossible to hide. As adolescence settled in, internal tension grew. The cast felt a strong pull toward independence. Curiosity about the world expanded. Interests shifted. New emotional layers emerged. But the show required stability, not evolution. This created emotional strain. Their public identity remained fixed, while their private identity rapidly evolved. They lived inside two worlds, one frozen in gentle childhood, the other racing toward adulthood. Behind the scenes, concern quietly spread. Producers feared losing audience trust. Networks worried about declining ratings. The system tightened. Guidelines became more specific. Oversight increased. Emotional boundaries grew firmer. For the cast, this meant more restriction at the very moment they needed freedom. Their natural desire to explore identity was met with caution. Emotional expression became risk management. Growth felt dangerous. Some began pulling inward. Others tested small boundaries. Tiny acts of independence carried emotional weight. Even subtle changes felt meaningful. These quiet shifts marked the beginning of separation between their true selves and their public roles. Relationships also changed. Childhood friendships faded. New connections formed cautiously. Trust became complex. Public identity shaped personal interaction. Being known made authenticity harder. As filming continued, emotional fatigue emerged. Repetition, pressure, and restraint accumulated. The joy of performance slowly blended with exhaustion. Moments of doubt became more frequent. The structure that once felt comforting now felt confining. Yet gratitude remained. They understood how rare their opportunity was. They valued the support they received. But appreciation did not erase emotional cost. Beneath the surface, uncertainty continued to grow. The studio tried to preserve balance, but time refused to pause. Ratings shifted. Viewer expectations changed. The inevitable question approached: how long could this world continue? And then, quietly, the answer arrived. The show would soon end. The structure that had shaped their entire childhood was about to disappear. And none of them were prepared for the silence that would follow. When the cameras finally shut down, silence replaced structure. The carefully planned days, the constant guidance, and the steady rhythm of production disappeared almost overnight. For the cast, life suddenly felt unfamiliar. The system that had shaped their identity since childhood was gone. There were no scripts to follow, no directors to guide emotions, no schedules to provide certainty. Freedom arrived quickly, but it did not feel simple. It felt disorienting. For years, every decision had been influenced by expectation. Now, choice belonged to them alone. Some felt excitement, others felt unease. Without constant structure, even small decisions felt heavy. What to study, where to go, who to trust, how to define success. Public attention slowly faded. The applause quieted. Recognition became occasional instead of constant. For some, this brought relief. Privacy returned. Ordinary moments felt new again. But for others, the loss of visibility created emotional confusion. Their sense of value had long been tied to public response. Without that feedback, self-worth needed rebuilding. Some pursued acting. Others shifted toward education, business, or creative fields. Each path required courage. Without the safety of a familiar system, failure became real. Mistakes could no longer be edited out. Growth happened without protection. Emotionally, adjustment took time. Years of emotional restraint did not disappear overnight. Expressing frustration, fear, or doubt felt unfamiliar. Vulnerability required learning. Trust developed slowly. Relationships were built carefully. Friendships outside the industry felt different. Conversations were simpler. Expectations were lower. But emotional openness took patience. Many had spent years performing emotional balance. Now they had to learn emotional honesty. Independence brought both opportunity and anxiety. Freedom allowed exploration, but also exposed uncertainty. Without clear direction, some struggled to define purpose. The world felt wide, but unclear. Memories of childhood fame lingered. Sometimes they brought comfort, other times pressure. The contrast between past recognition and present anonymity created emotional tension. Moving forward required letting go of old identity while honoring what it had given them. Family relationships shifted. Without the demands of production, connection deepened. Time became flexible. Moments slowed. Emotional space expanded. Healing quietly began. Yet the psychological imprint of early control remained. Structure still felt safe. Order still felt comforting. Chaos felt unsettling. It took years to build confidence without external guidance. Gradually, resilience emerged. They learned to adapt, to fail, to try again, to build purpose slowly. Success became personal rather than public. Life without the script became a journey of rediscovery. Each step forward carried uncertainty, but also growth. Identity slowly separated from childhood roles. Self-worth rebuilt from within. But even as independence strengthened, one truth remained. Early experiences never fully disappear. They shape how freedom is understood. They influence how trust is built. They guide how self-worth is measured. And beneath the surface of adult life, echoes of that controlled childhood continued to quietly shape who they became. As adulthood unfolded, the emotional impact of childhood fame began revealing itself in quiet ways. Without the structure of the studio, unresolved feelings surfaced. The pressure that once stayed hidden beneath discipline now asked for attention. Reflection became unavoidable. For years, emotional restraint had been necessary. Calm reactions were rewarded. Strong feelings were softened. But adulthood required emotional honesty. This shift was not easy. Many found it difficult to identify their own needs. Decision-making carried unfamiliar weight. Emotional boundaries had to be rebuilt from the ground up. Relationships became mirrors. Trust, vulnerability, and intimacy required skills that had not fully developed inside controlled environments. Some struggled to express frustration or fear. Others found themselves withdrawing during conflict. Emotional responses that once kept stability now complicated connection. Public memory remained frozen in childhood. Fans still saw innocence and warmth. But inside, complexity had grown. The contrast between who they were and who the world remembered created subtle emotional isolation. It was difficult to feel fully seen. Career choices brought further challenges. Moving beyond childhood fame required resilience. Success came slowly. Rejection became part of growth. Without guaranteed approval, self-worth had to come from internal validation rather than applause. Some faced anxiety. Others encountered periods of uncertainty and emotional fatigue. Healing unfolded unevenly. There was no shared path, only individual journeys shaped by reflection and time. Family support became essential. Loved ones offered grounding. Conversations deepened. Old memories were revisited with new understanding. Slowly, emotional processing replaced emotional suppression. Private struggles remained largely invisible. Public perception focused on nostalgia, not lived experience. The gentle childhood image persisted, while the adult reality stayed mostly unseen. Through introspection, many began connecting patterns. They recognized how early discipline shaped emotional habits. Awareness brought choice. Growth brought perspective. Healing became intentional. Acceptance followed gradually. Their past no longer defined them, but it informed them. Lessons learned under pressure became tools for resilience. Patience replaced urgency. Self-compassion replaced perfection. Yet reconciliation with early experiences remained incomplete. Gratitude and loss coexisted. Pride and regret intertwined. The journey toward emotional integration continued. As time passed, one question quietly remained. Could understanding their past allow them to fully release it? Or would early control always echo within their choices? With time, distance, and reflection, a slow transformation began. The need to meet expectations gradually gave way to the desire to understand the self. Years of emotional discipline softened. Space opened for honest feeling. Identity started forming beyond childhood roles. This process was not dramatic. It unfolded quietly, shaped by small decisions and private realizations. Moments of clarity arrived unexpectedly. A choice made freely. A conversation spoken honestly. A boundary respected. Each step helped rebuild emotional ownership. For some, healing began through creative expression. Writing, music, teaching, or mentorship offered ways to process experience. For others, family life provided grounding. Parenthood brought perspective. The lessons once performed on screen became real values guiding daily life. Relationships deepened. Vulnerability strengthened connection. Trust grew through patience. Emotional fluency developed slowly, replacing guarded restraint with openness. The pressure to perform faded. Success became personal. Peace replaced validation. Stability replaced recognition. Purpose no longer depended on applause. Self-acceptance followed. They began honoring both who they were and who they became. Childhood experiences transformed into wisdom rather than limitation. Their past became context, not control. Yet public memory remained powerful. Fans continued to associate them with innocence and warmth. While comforting, this nostalgia also created emotional distance. They learned to hold both realities, who the world remembered and who they truly were. This balance required strength. It meant allowing appreciation without surrendering identity, gratitude without obligation, respect without performance. Through time, the emotional weight of early control loosened. Reflection replaced pressure. Choice replaced expectation. Freedom became internal rather than external. They were no longer shaped by a system. They were shaping themselves. But one quiet challenge remained. Could they fully step beyond the image that built their fame? Or would that gentle childhood world always follow them? Decades later, Leave It to Beaver continues to occupy a unique place in television history. Its calm lessons, gentle humor, and picture-perfect family life remain cultural touchstones. Fans still revisit episodes, remembering the Cleaver family as a symbol of warmth, stability, and innocence. The show's legacy is undeniable, its impact enduring. But behind the familiar smiles, the truth is more nuanced. For the cast, the world they helped create carried layers of influence that reached far beyond the screen. Childhood shaped by control, schedules, and expectation left quiet imprints, emotional echoes that surfaced throughout adulthood. The calm world they performed in was real enough to shape identity, but invisible pressures lingered long after the cameras stopped rolling. The transition into adulthood was gradual. Freedom replaced structure, yet the lessons of discipline, restraint, and careful presentation continued to inform choices. Relationships required patience, trust, and negotiation. Careers demanded confidence without the familiar safety net. Decisions, both personal and professional, carried the weight of experience that had been meticulously guided for years. For many, reflection became a tool for growth. They learned to reconcile past expectations with present freedom, to accept that childhood experiences could teach without defining them. Self-awareness became central, allowing them to reclaim parts of themselves that had been deferred, hidden, or suppressed. Slowly, identity shifted from what the audience expected to what felt authentic. Even as they embraced adulthood, public perception remained present. Nostalgia cast a long shadow, reminding them of the innocence audiences cherished. While this recognition brought warmth and appreciation, it also created subtle tension. The gentle image of youth was fixed in time, while their internal lives had evolved and matured. Yet, through that tension, resilience emerged. The cast developed emotional literacy. They learned patience, empathy, and self-compassion. They discovered that understanding one's past does not require being bound by it. It allows for choice, reflection, and growth. The skills learned in a controlled childhood became tools for navigating adult life, relationships, and personal purpose. The legacy of Leave It to Beaver is therefore twofold. It is a story of comfort and calm for viewers. It is also a deeply human story of growth, identity, and quiet resilience for those who created it. The smiles, lessons, and warmth were real, but so were the unseen pressures and emotional complexities that shaped lives beyond the screen. And sometimes, the most meaningful truths are not the ones remembered publicly, but the ones quietly lived. The experiences of the cast remind us that behind every perfect image, there is a human story, complex, evolving, and enduring. Because what happened next quietly shaped the lives they would spend the rest of their years becoming.